Hey guys, Sam here. Just giving you a forewarning before this episode, just to let you know this is going to be a different episode. This is an interview that was conducted by Jordana with Dan Abella, who is the showrunner and creator of the Psychedelic Film and Music Festival. He also does the horror, science fiction and horror festival in New York as well. So this is a special interview that Jordana conducts. So you may wonder why I'm being quiet, or if you're doing the video feed or the live or the audio feed. I'm really taking more of a producer role in this. I'll chime in here and there, but it is a very special episode in that regard because it's going to be a little bit different in tone. So if this is your thing, cool, check it out. If not, if you just want to hear us talk about crazy movies, we'll see you next week. Otherwise, enjoy the episode.
Hey guys, welcome to Feature Creatures DTF. I am one half of your host, Jordana, and I am joined by my other half, Sam.
Hello, friends.
Hello, guys. Tonight we have a very special returning guest. We have Mr. Daniel Abella from the Psychedelic Music and Film Festival. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Jordana. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good, good. Just finally getting some releases out to the filmmakers. Dealing with the logistics of organizing a live and an online festival.
Oh yes, the fun in that. I'm sure there's so much to it behind the scenes.
Yeah, well, it's always surprises. That's the thing. I mean, last minute, and so we're kind of used to it by now because we've been doing this for quite some time.
Right. Yes, this is the 6th annual this year, correct?
That's right, the 6th annual.
Yes. So why don't you explain, kind of give like a little backstory to this festival? Because I know that we collaborated last year with the science fiction festival. So let us know.
Well, back in 2018, I had Dennis McKenna, who was a very well-known psychedelic researcher, ethnobotanist, scientist, and at our Philip K. Dick Festival in New York City. So we chatted, and he recommended that I organize a psychedelic film festival in New York City and have it in conjunction with another event that's taking place a week away from us. So I thought about it. At first, it didn't never really occur to me to do that, but I was always interested in psychedelic films, such as, for example, Jodorowsky or Gaspar Noé. And it said, well, it makes perfect sense. So we organized it, and it really was a very successful festival. We managed to get a lot of people on board and showed a lot of films and documentaries, and here we are 5 years later.
Well, that's amazing. It's good to see the momentum still going, and to continue on. So psychedelics, what are we talking for psychedelics?
Okay, well, psychedelic, I mean, with psychedelics, we talk about anything that's mind altering.
Yes.
So this is a challenge that we always have to work with people when people think psychedelics. We're going to be tripping on some strange herb or something. Well, they can do that at home. But what we do at our festival is we show films and practices that can induce altered states. Now, we do have documentaries that are very ecological, and that do promote the use of certain substances, certain botanicals, in the right context. But we also have documentaries that deal with altered states that are achieved by drumming or meditation or prayer or anything that gets us out of our own, that left brain consciousness, which I think we really need more than ever. So we feel that this is a very important festival to raise awareness. Some people have thought, well, why don't you just call it the Transpersonal Festival? And we thought about it, but unfortunately, transpersonal evokes other kind of ideas, like this more new agey kind of lights and crystals, and that's not exactly where we wanted to go with this. We wanted to go with something that was more rooted on practices that have going back thousands of years.
Absolutely.
So every year is a little bit different. We get a variety of films and documentaries.
Yes, and it's quite a lineup this year. And I like that you said about the crystals, because I see like a lot of, crystal healing nowadays. Like that's, a practice, but it's good to incorporate newer practices with older practices, because like you said, they've been around for such a long time. It's good
Right.
to shed light on that for people, either at a crossroads or, wanting to explore. So it's nice to have that.
Exactly. I mean, these practices go back, many of them go back thousands of years. So
Yes.
they're just being reintroduced in a different kind of packaging. So it's definitely something that more people need to be aware of for their mental
Absolutely.
health.
Yeah, and it's good too, because mental health is, you know, a, um, an issue that I feel like it needs so much attention and so much light, because we don't have enough resources. You know what I mean? Like we don't have
Yeah.
enough people for mental health.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I remember reading recently that teenage girls are like really one of the main candidates. For over 40% of them have reported thoughts of suicide, not just during the pandemic, but afterwards. So
Absolutely.
it is a crisis. It is definitely an ongoing crisis. A lot of people, a lot of therapists, for instance, have their schedules booked because there's so many people who need help. Sometimes these people don't have necessarily the income to
Ex-
engage for a long-term, multi-month practice with a therapist, but
yeah.
nevertheless, they still need help. So I don't think there's enough right now emphasis on that. There are people who are talking about it, but it's
Mhm.
really something that it's probably at the root of a lot of the strange behavior people are exhibiting these days.
I agree with that. And it's also too like a lot of like for my mental health, I like to kind of like stay in a natural remedy. And I'm not saying that's for everyone, and I'm not
Right.
judging anyone who has to like take any sort of medication or anything like that, but it's nice to like have natural remedies, on hand, that could be maybe a little bit more easily available to them, like you said, than having, monthly, weekly therapy sessions that people maybe don't have insurance for.
Got it. I mean, I personally do about an hour and a half, well, an hour or so of meditation every day, and
Hmm.
I kind of created my own style, and it really has helped me significantly since 2018. In fact, prior to the first psychedelic film festival, I had tried meditation, but I really it was always difficult to sit down and just relax and focus on my breathing, but
Yeah.
I came across a documentary that someone had submitted to the festival, and I was their first adopter. I said, "Yeah, I'm going to do this," and I started doing it. And 5 years later, or 6 years later, I've been doing this, and it's really helped me with a lot of the daily stresses that come about from living in organizing festivals and just living here in the city.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I could only imagine being in such a huge city, needing some time to kind of be in a quiet headspace, because it just seems like it's always buzzing in New York City.
Yeah, the absolute. The key is this, that we really don't. I think one thing that we could definitely need to learn more from our indigenous friends or
Yeah.
even from other traditional cultures is the idea to listen to the environment, listen to the body, and listen to your mind. Because the universe is always trying to communicate to us.
Yes, I
Sometimes it
believe
will
that.
be a thought we get. Sometimes it's something in our body. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's something that happens to us outside. That's the field, I call it, or the space. So we always need to pay attention to really
Yes.
what's going on, and this will help us a lot with dealing with the kind of negotiation, the ongoing negotiation that we need to undergo with ourselves and the world on a
Absolutely.
daily basis.
Yes, it helps to get yourself in tune with not only like the world but other people as well. And it's a great thing, because that's what we need to have too, is to be in tune with each other.
Got it. And yeah, one of the things that we really are the reason I kind of embrace the psychedelic versus more the new age or the alternative is that within psychedelic, there's an understanding we have dark sides, we have a shadow, we have parts of ourselves that we've either ignored or have disowned. So, say through an ayahuasca ceremony, those parts come rushing to the surface.
Hmm.
Now, through meditation, you can do the same thing. It might take you years to clear up some of that debris, But part of the meditation is to, people think meditation is just blissful. No, meditation can be a very painful and sad experience. But if you're there as you're experiencing that experience, it kind of soothes, and then later you might feel much better. You might not, but it's still a good. It's a good idea.
Absolutely. I've actually just got into reading a book on meditation because I want to get into meditation, because I've been doing like journaling. I've been doing journaling for a while now, but I feel like that really helps to like release anything that's inside. And I feel like the festival is kind of similar. Like you get to show, and you get to like release these emotions and help other people,
Yeah, exactly. And the idea of meditation is that you need to be in that state of witnessing what's happening. And as you're witnessing an emotion, the key is not to identify with the emotion or reject it. Just be there for that emotion. And the result is usually kind of a more tranquil state. That emotion, if it's a long repressed memory, it might be very painful, but you need to always stay in that witness state, that state of just observing, seeing what's happening without reacting. And it takes work. Sometimes we gotta, but over time we get a sense of, some meditators say, well, it's just like imagine your thoughts are like clouds, and you are the sky, and you're looking at that. But sometimes it's not a cloud, it's like a rainstorm that comes in. Now what are you going to do? And that's where it gets a little bit, you really got to be grounded, and it takes practice. But I do think it's a practice. It's not the only one, but it's a practice that I think it's useful. And what I also found with a lot of people who go into psychedelics is that they're not able to sit down for 5 minutes and meditate. Is like, and that may be the reason why they're gravitating towards other ways like ayahuasca or some of the other treatments.
Yeah, exactly. Because one person, it's not across the board.
I mean, not everybody's is cut out for that. I thought that I was never, but somehow it actually happened shortly after I had a surgery on my leg. So I kind of was like bedridden for a while, and I was in a different state of mind and said, let me try this.
Yeah.
And also one thing I want to really emphasize is that when you go to a meditation class, at least the ones I went to, there was too much emphasis on correct posture, correct breathing. And I would say drop that. Just drop it in the beginning. Just you want to be able to just sit down with your thoughts, because a lot of people, including myself, got caught up in correct posture. And I said, there's no way I can ever sit like this. And I just dropped my meditation. But when I decided to say, forget about the posture, I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to follow my breath. That's it. Eventually, over time, I started looking at ways of correcting the posture. So that's one thing that we need to avoid, is that this perfectionistic streak that we got to compare ourselves to others. You just got to be there with yourself, and it's a lot of interesting stuff happens.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm glad that you said that, because it's not, it has to be this way or it's not going to work. It's just connecting and finding kind of like your own way in the practice.
You got to find your space, an internal space that you call it a sanctuary, or just a space where you can really be with yourself and your emotions, and in a peaceful, grounded way.
Absolutely. So with the festival too, you guys are offering a workshop, a transpersonal workshop.
Yes, I'll be organizing that because this is something that I do. I'm actually a counselor during the day, so I organize these festivals, but I also do counseling, and
awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah, and so it kind of like combines. So my focus is primarily on what I just mentioned, being able to understand that inside of us we have these different selves that are always trying to communicate to us.
Yeah.
Now, some people think, "Oh, that's the inner child." No, but that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. We have these selves that are of different ages, or you could call them behaviors or identifications or whatever, but they're always there. So the key is to understand who as a witness, when you're witnessing what's going on, you can understand who's talking here. I mean, have you ever had the experience where you say something and then later you say to yourself, gee, that wasn't me. Why did I even say that?
Oh, yes.
Well, guess what? It was you, but the other you. And it is the key. We have a lot of yous. It's not just one. It's just like for that moment, we become that self, which is part of our memory. So it's a self-organizing way of expressing oneself. So that's why the witness is important, because when you're in that witness, in that state of witnessing or being in a no mind, you can understand how these selves come and go and come and go and come and go. But behind that is the witness, which ideally will be there for those selves, which might or might not be empowered. So part of this workshop is to really get people to and we'll introduce certain practices, certain mantras, so to speak, to get in touch with that part of themselves that they feel that they haven't really they've kind of ignored or disowned, and encourage practices following up that. I mean, I tell people, when some of my clients, that they have always under this idea that we it's a fix. You're gonna fix me, and I said, no, you are gonna fix yourself. I'm just the facilitator. I'm just gonna give you a methodology that has worked for me and many others. And if you practice this, you'll find down the road more, and you'll be more empowered. Because a lot of therapy is traditional therapy is very disempowering. People are doing things to you most of the time. And I'm waiting to see my counselor or my therapist. And although that might be a moment for that, it's important. There are times when we really need help from our friends, when we need to have someone who's there for us. But there comes a moment where you're ready to fly, ready to move on. And that's where I really want to take my clients to, that moment where they feel strong enough that maybe they can call me a year from now and say this and that, but not like, oh my God, I got to get on the phone because this is happening. Because we have all the resources inside of us that we need to make the changes we need to make. The key is tapping into those resources, because when you're in a problem state, in a negative state, a negative emotion, guess what? Those resources are nowhere near accessible to yourself. Right. We're like stuck in a sinkhole. We can't get out. And so the idea is, when you retreat into that witness self, then you say, "Oh, but I can do this." I remember I'm not that bad at, say, French. I remember I'm not bad, or I'm and you can import that information, that awareness, into the part of us that feels weak and helpless and so on, disempowered. So it's a kind of a triangulation, which we do all the time. I mean, there's no days when I personally don't have to struggle with different aspects of myself, because we're always being pulled in different directions by the field, by the universe, by the culture, by the expectations of others. Like, we have different roles we play. We have the father, we have the son, we have the husband, we have the lover, we have the student, we have the worker, we have the employee, and each one of us sometimes works differently. It's like we're not congruent. Many of us are not. And the key is to find a way where you can become more and more congruent with everything you do. It's almost like having a big family, and you really got to pay attention. You got someone who's screaming here on one side, and the other side you got someone who is just ignoring. So you got to learn how to incorporate and create a space where everybody's welcome. And
that's a great way to explain it, because there are times where it's just like you're pulled in every single direction, and you have to be a certain way for like this task or for like this task, and it's good to like balance it out. And
for instance, I had a client that was she was married, and she was really good with her kids, and she was really able to negotiate when the husband would act a certain way and the kids were acting, and she was able to get into that state, right, with that, able to bring the people together. So, but unfortunately, she also had inside herself these parts of her that were fighting. So basically, I explained to her that what you're doing with your husband or with your kids, The way you approach them is the way you need to approach these parts inside you that are quarreling amongst each other. It's the same process. And when she got the knack of it,
that makes sense.
She kind of said, it never occurred to me that I have these different selves, because we're under the illusion we have one self, the adult.
Mm-hmm.
And anything else is, we just got to repress it, ignore it. Big mistake, because what happens is with most people, if you keep ignoring these tugs, or let's say, or these calls, eventually they stack up until one day it explodes, and then people say, "Well, this is a different person. Who is this person?" So we try to prevent that from happening, and usually we'll get telltale signs. We'll know that there's a part that wants to talk to us. Like you have a kid, right? Let's say, and 3 a.m, the kid is pulling on your legs. What's wrong? Well, sometimes when we wake up at 3 a.m, guess what? There's a part of us that is waking us for that reason. So what I usually do, I tell them, listen, can you please wait until the morning? Because at 3 a.m, I'm so disorganized. I don't even know what's happening. 3 a.m, like what's going on? And you have, please. And you know what? They do that.
Yes.
That aspects of myself, they literally wait. They wait, and I will thank these aspects continuously. Thank you for doing this. And now, how can I be more present to you? And that's so that's part of, and of course, it's something. The actual program we do is a multi-day program. But what I'll do in that hour and a half is give them a little sneak preview into what's possible.
And I think that's great, because I think a lot of people, when they get that realization of what you just explained and what you said, they're going to be so intrigued, and it's probably going to blow their minds, and they're going to be like, I need to know more. I need to know how to adapt to this. Or there might be people that are like in an intermediate stage and they need to be propelled to like the next step. So I think it's great that you're holding that workshop while you're.
And it's a safe. We're not going to go that deep that will create, we'll have people like, no, it will be very safe. One thing is like people come to me sometimes with a lot of anxiety, with serious anxiety disorders. So what I let them know is that anxiety is not a thing. Anxiety is two things. It's a process, and it's usually someone inside you, or inside that my client, that it's calling out, that feels. And you need to be the adult in the conversation.
Right.
So what I usually do is I will empower my client to really think of times when they felt in charge, competent, no matter what's thrown at them, they could, bounce, kind of a resilience. And then with that mindset, then we can approach the anxiety. Yes. But sometimes we forget how effective and powerful we can be. We lose track because we're always comparing ourselves to others.
Yes.
More money and more views, more likes, more friends, more whatever. And we don't realize that we ourselves, as long as we are a little bit better every day and we are really connecting, that's the right track. We're all on different tracks. We're not the same person with the same parallel track. Everybody's the same. Like, who wants to be like that anyway? It's boring.
Exactly. You got to be yourself. But it's nice to have festivals like this one to unite like people that feel indifferent, or, and just want to connect so they don't feel as indifferent, and know, hey, there are other people that have crippling anxieties, or there's, they don't know how to deal with this aspect, and I think it's great that you have that community to do that.
Exactly. And when the anxiety comes in, it's because someone has taken over the conversation. Mm-hmm. It's like the kid is running the show, and he's very upset and very sad. And so what I usually do is get him, as a therapist, as a counselor, I become a way creating this space where the client can understand how he's been ignoring that other part of him for so long. And it's time to, to really own that part and be for that part and be with that part, like witness kind of. So and of course having the environment like that the festival offers, it's also good, because sometimes we think we're the only ones with problems. Because if you read the news, everybody's, especially sometimes everybody's really in bad shape, or everybody's is doing much better than oneself. It's one or the other. And it's what about me? And I come to the conclusion that the news is like it's a funny business, because the really, really good news, it seems like be directed at the other people that are really successful or by their standards. The bad news is directed to us.
Yes.
But the good news is like, well, what is Elon Musk is doing? How many he's going, when he's going to Mars?
Yeah.
That's not going to help me pay my rent.
No, and focusing on that is going to make it even more difficult to deal with, like,
Exactly.
just getting to that step. So if you have positive reinforcement, like you said, distinguishing the good in the news and the bad in the news, it's gonna help, because you're right. Everyone's so dependent on checking in on the news and what's going on with the Kardashians and what they're doing, and you just feel the sense of like ugh. Or you feel like that's great for them, like trying to remain positive. I like to try to stay positive. That's like a mantra for me that helps me to not get into like a deep hole, is to just be positive.
I feel like it just becomes overwhelming if you let too much of that stuff come into your life. I mean, it's sensory overload, and then you almost become numb. That's how I feel about it, at least.
Yeah, you definitely got to build blinkers, have blinkers, so you can just focus on what you do, and really and kind of look at what others people are doing, but not become obsessed with that. Because a few years back there was a documentary on Facebook and how they have introduced these. Through their likes, they introduced this kind of a dopamine hit, and there was a big. But I would argue that that's not just Facebook. Any kind of social media, can have an addictive, and usually in a very negative way.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter whether you're surfing YouTube or going on this on network news. Right. Everybody's attention is the most important commodity right now. Yes. And everybody's trying to do whatever they can to grab those 30 seconds or a minute or two from you, so they can promote their product. And people are waking up, but we need more ways of handling that. And I would say the most effective ways start creating yourself. Yes. Start create creativity, whether putting together a podcast or writing a book or writing a movie. I mean, a movie script or writing a song. Exactly. And really reconnecting with your creative self is the way out of this zoo. I mean, it's really, and that's the way we. So it's not just filmmakers, but any kind of artist who has always or a person who has speculated, well, maybe I can be a painter, or I can do this. They should do it, and at least try it out, because it's probably the best kind of therapy. The Absolutely. Creative self can get you out of that malaise of insignificance of and that's really what I encourage to my clients, but also in the festival itself.
Well, that's good. And you make a valid point too. Like, I always wanted to do a podcast, and I wanted to do it for myself, not necessarily for like views, because I'm thinking I'm just a peon. Like, who's gonna listen to me like talk about the things I want to talk about? And right. Come to find out, there are people that want to listen to it. And then Sam and I connected, and I got to meet him, and we have this show. And when Sam and I do the show, we don't look for like how many followers we have, how many people viewed. We just like to talk about things that bring out happiness or evoke some sort of emotion in us. You know right. what I mean? So it's nice to have that creative connection with people.
Oh, absolutely. You're finding your own tribe. You kind of your group, and they can support you. You support them, and that it works both ways. And rather than just like going it alone, you're always gonna have people that will appreciate what the audacity or tenacity or strength or just putting together a program week after week. They'll say, yeah, I like, more often than not, that's what attracts people. It's not just the quality of the content, yes, that's or the how professional, but if passion and intensity and something different, like when everybody else is doing, people say, yeah, I like what they have to say. Let me see what's next week's podcast or so.
Exactly.
Hey, so Dan, I got speaking of content, I've got a question for you that I've wanted to ask because it's been a kind of a running theme on our podcast lately.
Right.
We've been trying to define themes of films. So like we tried to define, like we did a whole episode on thriller movies, and we found that the term thriller is something that's thrown out there, and it's really a really big net. What would you, for your festival, how would you try to define or cast that net when it's in regards to a psychedelic film?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, we usually do is we have shorts that we feel are closer to, say, psychedelic sci-fi, or shorts that are dealing with supernatural. Similarly, if it's a short that deals with someone taking, say, some substance and then documenting that, I call it under the influence. Right. If it's a short, and then we play around with different terms. Like, for instance, the beginning of block is enter the rabbit hole. It's like, okay, so rather than finding the specific themes, we try to like find something that's compelling for people. That's really, for instance, we got 2 documentaries. One is actually narrated by Dennis McKenna. It's called Biognosis. Yep. And the other one is chronicling the challenges of the Shipibo Indians in the Brazilian rainforest. And both dealing with vanishing cultures. So the theme is our vanishing world. Wow. So what McKenna's doing is he's trying to at least sample all these, because he knows in 1 or 2 generations, a lot of these plants will be gone. So at least maintain some kind of a database or a seed base for that. Yeah. And as for the other documentary, it's called Onania, dealing with the Shipibo Indians. The director interviews them and explores what's happening in their village, and how their modern civilization is slowly encroaching more and more on their way of life, and their whole culture is being basically decimated. So it really varies. I look at the content, and then based upon what the content is providing, then I will think of something that is relevant to that. And so, yeah, I mean, there are definitely, for instance, within science fiction, you are a lot of categories, right? You got like the space opera, you have sci-fi horror, you got you have the supernatural sci-fi, which is a little bit different, and so on. So the idea is to really look at the film itself and drum up your own category that comes closest to that.
I think that makes sense. And earlier in the episode, you mentioned referencing Hodorowski, and that's where my mind, when I hear psychedelic film, my mind goes right to like El Topo, and but like I think it makes sense, like you said, that it's such a wide net that it's out there that it really can fall into a lot of different subcategories.
Right. I mean, mostly we get, for instance, in our festival, we get experimental, not psychedelic, experimental, really hardcore, like Stan Brakhage kind of experimental filmmaking, like Super 8, and they're cutting the actual film and showing it on the big screen. We have that. We have
that's cool.
Surrealist films, like something that would be out of Jodorowsky or more close to Luis Buñuel, or what's the other Spanish director? I forget now. But basically, surrealist films, and then we have so we have those types. You have the experimental, we have surreal films, we have the sci-fi, we got the psychedelic horror. And then with the surreal, I think abstract expressionism. That's another one. Yeah. Just slides of black. That's it, just a black slide. But we don't overdo it with that. We just maybe show 1 or 2. But the key is to sample enough of that world. So, I mean, if it was up to me, I would have a longer sounding festival name, like the psychedelic, surrealist, but then it would lose people. So I
might get
just
muddy
got
at a certain point. Yeah.
psychedelic.
So a follow-up question to that.
So every year is a little
sorry.
bit different. So for instance, this year we got a lot of documentaries. We actually have a good number of documentaries. Last year was more shorts. So it varies from year to year. Some years we have documentaries focusing on veterans and their plight and their problems with that. So it varies from year to year, you know.
So, Dan, what would you say? Because we've talked to you about the science fiction and horror convention that you've done and the film festival, and now obviously this. Based on the two conversations that we've had before, I mean, I'm sensing like just it feels like a pretty drastic tonal shift. What would you say the biggest differences that you have between the two, and you as the person actually, you know, putting the whole show together? What's the biggest difference?
Well, I think the difference is just superficial. I think that there actually are a lot more commonalities between psychedelic films and sci-fi. And the idea is that what drew me to the whole subject matter is Philip K. Dick, right? I mean, so Philip K. Dick is a very complex sci-fi writer. Not only did he have in his 60s, he did take a lot of amphetamines, unfortunately, because he had to write he was being literally paid pennies on every word. That's why he wrote over 40 novels and 121 short stories, a huge amount. So he was on amphetamines a lot. He did take some LSD, not a lot though, by his own admissions, maybe once or twice. But he was also psychologically very fragile at times. But he also had a visionary, a mystical experience, 2374, where he thought he was either he had a psychotic breakdown, or it was a come to Jesus moment, a moment, you know, he really wasn't sure. So I think within Philip K. Dick, I see a lot of the things that I'm doing. It's all super. When we think of sci-fi, when I just talking about I'm not certainly focusing on only the like space operas and going to some other planets, but what's going on inside of us. And so sci-fi for me is kind of the science of the future, or, you know, the science of tomorrow. And psychedelics is really an expression of altered states of consciousness. So I don't feel there is such a stark contrast between the two. It's more about the kind of films that so for often, a lot of the films that we play at the psychedelic, we might play at the Philip K. Dick and vice versa.
Okay.
So that's, I think that's, in my book, is trying to cast as wide a net as possible. Yes. So a lot of the sci-fi that we have focuses, particularly PKD, focuses on the dangers of technology. And I feel that psychedelics is a kind of an antidote to that, because by exploring our inner world through various practices, we don't need to be so dependent on technology to tell us what we need to do from day to day.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
that makes sense.
And so I would say that in a way they balance each other out. It's almost like psychedelic is more of a kind of a helping out with the problems we're dealing with technology, so technology is very much left brain, very linear, whereas psychedelics is more right brain. So I find it too, it's a nice balance. It's a nice integration.
Yeah. Yes, works nice.
Yeah. And the key is to have that, because unfortunately a lot of a lot of people have done too much psychedelics, end up too much on the right brain, in a sense. It's like they're really spaced out and they're not grounded. So the left brain is very important, because it's that part of us that it plans for the future, that focuses, that executes, that implements, that makes us want to grab a piece of food, hunts or whatever. Whereas the right brain is just very happy where it is right now. So you got to have both working at the same time rather than one. So a lot of people have done too much psychedelics, and I want to mention the psychedelics is not for everyone, especially these kind of substances. Mm-hmm. Some people, you got to know, if got to start very little, see if you can handle it, you know, and if you can't, just there are other ways of. So someone once said the psychedelics is like the difference in psychedelics and meditation is like the psychedelic in meditation, you're just climbing up that mountain slowly and looking at the landscape. Whereas in say DMT trip, you're taking a super fast elevator to the top.
Yes.
So which one you want to go with? And ayahuasca is sort of in between. Ayahuasca is like a 24-hour purging period. It can be pretty dreadful from what I heard. So.
Wow. We do see a lot of like microdosing for like with you know, the connection with mental health nowadays, and I think that's super interesting because I can see where it could be beneficial, and I can see where it might not be for some people.
Yeah, I mean, you really got to know yourself. I mean, what at the end of the day, we all have and we manufacture all these substances inside our head.
Mm-hmm.
Everything from DMT to opiates to. The reason they work is because they kind of mimic the same action these substances are. For instance, the runner's high, endorphins. That's why they go on these, you know, they even though they're injured and they have, they still want to run because there's that kind of high.
Yeah.
So I think one day we'll be able to, hopefully science will enable us to know what our levels are, and we'll be able to voluntarily raise them. For instance, what's our DMT level? Or maybe DMT kind of breaks down very quickly, but perhaps endorphins and other kinds of neurotransmitters, because this way we'll be able to engage in a positive way, kind of through a biofeedback loop to get ourselves better. You know, so we are our own pharmacists. I mean, really are. Say, for instance, if you take one thought and you say to yourself, very negative thought over and over, after a while, you're going to start feeling really bad, really dreadful.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and same thing for another thought. So a more positive thought. So we can change our own neurochemistry. It just takes a little bit longer than in the case of the psychedelics with DMT or ayahuasca. The way I would say that is this: the people who trying ayahuasca because they have PTSD, they have such a powerful, significant negative experience from either war or being a first responder or being sexually traumatized. They need an equally balanced, really equally powerful endogenous experience to kind of nullify that.
Right.
So that's why ayahuasca is that powerful. But at the end of the day, this is where I differ with a lot of people who are the idea of saying, well, the plants told me, or the Aya told me, Mother Aya. I disagree with that. Is the plant in so far as we're all connected? Yes, but there's not one thing. We can be connected to our computer, to the air, to the sun. That can also communicate to us information.
Absolutely.
But I do think it's a balancing, because a lot of the people have such negative loops from having gone to war, and I met many veterans of that is that they're unable to really access those states I was talking about earlier. Now, a few years ago, I did I conducted a play at the festival called Timothy X, which basically loosely based on my interaction with a client. So there are methods of running a film backwards. What happened, but you run it backwards. Yeah. And that kind of disconnects the emotional charge of what happened. And I depend on single PTSD level 1, not complex PTSD, basic PTSD, responds fairly well to those techniques. So EMDR is another one. Yeah. That is shown to be very effective. But complex PTSD, say a kid who, when he was that gets beaten up by his father, gets thrown into a closet, whipped, and then when he grows up, he joins the army because his father was in the army, and even though he hated his father, just to show that he's a real man, and then what does he do? He's traveling down the road, hits an IED. Now he's got PTSD. So that PTSD is complex PTSD. It's not just from that one incident. It goes way back to his childhood and abuse, violence abused by his father.
Yeah.
So that's complex. That involves a lot of systems, and that's something that takes a lot. It takes more work, and that's why a lot of veterans are saying that the MDMA therapy, ketamine therapy, is very effective in the follow up, because it kind of like intercepts that neural circuitry in our brain that's so embedded, and it's almost like a knot. Now there's no way you can get around that, and it's very tough when you don't have access to these powerful emotional experiences.
Absolutely.
So
it's great to be there for them for that too,
veterans are really, we send them to war, they come back all wounded, and we ignore them. And really, I mean, I've done, one of our festivals was a festival for the veterans, raising money for the Wounded Warrior Project. So I really have a heart for them, because they really work so hard, and they're trying to, and they can come back. Everybody ignores them. So that we can go and have our cafes and lattes and so on. We go and fight the wars with that. So veterans definitely are a tough group to deal with, because they also don't trust the civilian population, rightfully so. But I also say to them is, listen, what you have there is, you're a shaman in making, because when you're at war, especially if you're in combat, you're living life at such a level of intensity that, of course, when you're going to go back, everything is going to feel like a movie, because you can't live more intense than when every day you're going, you won't know if that's your last day.
Right.
It could be also first responders, certain kinds of cops and so on. But it's that kind of intensity. And when they come back to civilian life, instead of being debriefed, rite of passage, they just probably meet up with a couple of counselors, and they say, hey, how you feeling? Oh, I'm feeling okay. But then a few months later, the stuff starts happening. The drinking, the smoking, the violent outbursts. I had a friend who did two tours of duty in Afghanistan, and he told me that he had a few years back, one of his friends was very unhappy. He was having serious PTSD. So he called the veteran and says, well, I'd like to see someone tomorrow. And this is, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to wait 2 months. The next day, he just grabbed it and shot himself.
Oh my God.
Wow.
And this happens a lot.
It's
this happens a lot.
Yep. And it should be readily available for them, because it's not like a time thing. It could be, a couple days back, they're not feeling okay. It could be a year. It's all processed different. Exactly. And we really need to be there for them.
Absolutely. We really do. And that's another reason for me putting together this festival is also, this year we didn't really have any documentaries with that, but in the last few years we've had always at least one documentary featuring a veteran. And one year we had a documentary with I believe it was a Hoop Dreams, the director of Hoop Dreams. Remember back like 10 years ago from Sundance? He actually is also, he helps veterans through, and his is more like a vision quest. So they go out into the Arizona desert, and they spend 5 days and 5 nights just drinking water, and it's just like, and they come back transformed. So not everything is about going MDMA. There are different modalities. So that's what they need to be aware of. And the last one is, the least effective is pharmaceuticals. They really don't do much,
And pharmaceuticals are so easy nowadays to get addicted to and to cause, more problems than to do good. I mean, I'm not speaking for everyone, but
right, of course, yeah.
It does come up sometimes that it creates more problems than it does help. So
unfortunately, they create a lot of dependency.
Yes.
And that's one thing that we really need to watch out for. But I mean, the more people are aware of these available practices, whether you're going on a vision quest, or whether you're doing ayahuasca, whether you're seeking kind of a solidarity with your fellow vets and really cry your heart out, because sometimes these guys have so much emotion. Remember, when they're in war, they can't afford to be in the battlefield. They can't afford to process those emotions. So they're essentially stuck neurologically. They're stuck in the amygdala, and they're not processed into long-term memory like the hippocampus. So of course, they're literally unable to process it into long. So anything, it's almost they're living there is a short-term memory. So any sound immediately triggers their reaction. They drop to the floor, or they run away, or so a lot what long-term memory does is kind of like softens the image of the memory, and the charge is dampened. But there's so much charge the amygdala is holding on to that it's unable to process it. It's almost like kind of emotional indigestion. You're just like stuck with this, and it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And literally when it has to come out, and when it comes out, you gotta give them space, because it's going to be quite an outburst.
Yes, and be prepped and ready for it, which is,
and that applies to people with trauma, any kind of violent or sexual trauma. It's the same thing. It's the same kind of a system. It's unprocessed emotion, and either at that time it may not have been appropriate, and then they didn't process it late. That's why I'm saying it may not be appropriate to process the emotion at that moment, but make sure you process it. Make sure you give yourself that opportunity that's what I tell my clients, down the line, to process the emotion.
Exactly. And I think it's great that you're advocating for them, and you're doing, festivals like this again to like help these people and to have like a path, and just be readily available for them. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, more than anything is they want people to be seen, because you see when say someone comes back from war, and the kind of stuff that happens in war usually it doesn't happen in civilian life, so they're unable to really connect with their family or with their spouses or with their kids and so on, because there's something that's sometimes almost for the average person is almost abstract, the violence, especially combat duty, and the way that's why when that film came out, Eastwood's film, American Sniper, remember that years ago? So I had kind of mixed feelings about that, because the problem was that the character at the end supposedly he was trying to help his friend who had PTSD. Well, let's go shooting. Well, that's the last thing you want to do, to give someone a gun, because he might just turn on you or whoever, and just he blacks out. So, so there was I don't think there was enough focus on after kind of an afterword on what could have happened. Had he done this or had he done that?
Yeah, exactly.
So, and a little bit too much glorification of that, of the sniper. I mean, generally, although snipers, some people might argue are necessary for war, but what happens to them internally must be awful, because they're essentially this disconnecting from what they're doing.
Yeah, I could not even imagine.
So not even someone dropping bombs, because a bomb is so far away. It's like, well, I don't know what happened. But in sniper, you know what you're doing, and you're just targeting that person who might very well be about to kill 100 people. So it's like, but nevertheless, the emotional violence to oneself must be devastating. You can't just like, oh well, I just put it away and close the door. Well, I hope the door doesn't open up, because it's so it's understanding where you're coming from and so on. But what I tell PTSD people is that war is an initiation. It's an initiation. Unfortunately, the PTSD is a botched initiation. So I've spoken to a lot of Marines, and even though they've been to Afghanistan, they want to go back, not to Afghanistan, but that kind of intensity of solidarity they had with their friends, or whether you can't get in civilian life.
Right. Yeah.
So I want to go back. I want to go. It's like that kind of being fully alive, even though the next moment may be dead. For them, is something that's why many of them keep going back 2 or 3, 4 tours of duty. Why you want to do that? And so one thing that would help them is we had things in our own life that could possibly not quite match that level of intensity, but something that really could help them reconnect, because it's a botched initiation. It's not fully carried out to from beginning to end. And it's unfortunate, because a lot of them do come back damaged.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's kind of like rewritten their brain to just like you said, feel this need to go back because that's at that point that's all they know. You know what I mean? Like, of course, they know
Well,
themselves
it's
growing
like
up.
it's like a high. It's
Yeah.
like those people who are jump out of airplanes, right?
Yeah. Adrenaline
Like,
junkies.
why do you want to do that? I mean, you maybe a great experience, but there may be other safer ways of doing that.
Yeah.
Or they climb up a building, and then the daredevils, so to speak, is they get there's an emotional high. But I think the emotional high is not to one activity; it's just the context you're dealing with a group of people who are going out and they're on a mission. They all are focused on the same thing, and it's kind of that group mind, which they 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 miss when they return back to normal life, civilian
Yeah.
life.
Yeah, I completely agree. But speaking of adrenaline, so you have a premiere presentation for Matthew Modine this year.
Yes, yes. I actually a couple so a month ago, or so we had his producer reached out to us.
That's
So hopefully
amazing.
Matthew will be there. He's a New York man. He's a New York native, so
Oh
he
wow.
really wanted to have a present an East Coast premiere. He had his one in L.A., but he's
Yeah.
from New York, so hopefully by that time the strike will be over. I know the writer's strike is over. I understand. Not sure about that,
Yeah.
but
They came to an agreement, I believe, for the writers. Yeah.
right. So I'm not sure if that's impacting him or it's more the director. So we'll find out. Hopefully he'll be there.
Yeah.
I don't think Dennis will be there because Dennis is right now. McKenna is in Vancouver.
Oh
So,
wow.
however, I'm gonna see if I can reach out to him and we can do an online because on Sunday, which is the online version,
Yeah.
we those directors that are unable to show up, we create a space for them so they can we can have a little talk and hopefully he'll be able to join us on at least online to
Yeah.
talk
That'd be
about
nice.
his documentary.
Yes.
It'd be awesome.
But I thought that was awesome because I love Matthew Modine. I remember him from currently from Stranger Things.
Oh yeah, he's great. He's great.
Yes.
I didn't know he was that tall, 6'3".
Oh wow. I would never
I would
I would
not have
never
guessed
think.
it.
No.
Yeah, 6'3". Is it? He's tall, but it's so yeah. He's great. I mean, so hopefully he'll be at the festival. We won't know. I mean, until I guess we get a couple of days beforehand.
Yeah, well, I hope for you guys that he does because that would be awesome to have him join. And then I want to touch a little bit on the music aspect. So,
Sure.
is there a lineup of like bands that are performing, like any returners from last year, or?
No, so this year we basically have bands, mostly psychedelic bands, but there are no live bands. It's just
Yep.
mostly music videos that have been of these bands,
Yeah.
and they're everything ranging from 60s to contemporary stoner rock.
Yes.
So we got a nice mix. It's very very cool, and they're actually music videos. It's not just the band playing, but there's a whole visual component to that.
Sometimes I feel like that's nice to have that. I mean, I love live music, but sometimes having their ideas, transferred into a music video and having the music along.
Live
Just
music is actually kind of tricky in New York City because I'm not sure how it is in other places, but I remember the year one we had a live music. We had the composer for Santa Sangre from Jodorowsky. He came in,
nice. Yeah.
and we had a couple other psychedelic bands play, but it was much harder to promote for one thing. And it really is. I think that it's tricky. You really, unless the bands are local. See, if the bands are local and have a huge following, okay. Now the bands are international, which is beyond our budget,
Right.
So
Right.
you got to find then a band that it's psychedelic that has that kind of pull, but it's not easy. And also working with the clubs, man, it's just tough.
Isn't there a curfew in New York City too for live music?
In terms of depends on the club. I think
Yeah.
I mean, certainly the cabaret license, they do require you to have a cabaret license. They do require that you have a specific venue space for that.
Yes, because I'm traveling to New York City soon to see a music, uh, to see an artist, and on the venue that I'm going, it did say a curfew, and it gave like a time, which I think at some places, like you said, other or some spots it could be.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that would apply to. I think that most places are open till like 1 or 2 in the morning in terms of bands.
Yeah.
When we did it in 2018, when we actually had bands in 2019, 2021, but I don't think that there was an issue. So I guess it depends. It really is entirely up to the club.
Yeah. But that's awesome though. I'm excited to. I'd like to be able to attend the virtual day and to see everything, because all of this is right up my alley. All of this is
we'll definitely have Jonathan send you a link. Not every single film will be, because we have 2 days, a day and a half, but we have 1 day. So there'll be most likely you'll get to see a lot of the shorts.
Yeah.
So a lot of the features. Also, a lot of filmmakers don't want to have. They really want to keep their features to live, rightfully so. Most likely we'll have the shorts in the program, and that include and some of the short but the documentaries too. So we'll definitely want to have Dennis on board, and maybe we can reach out to Matthew. I mean, if he cannot meet us, if he's still in LA, maybe we can do a short, Q&A with him in online. That'd be awesome.
That'd be cool. I think people would really like that.
Yeah, that way people really understand. So it doesn't matter. That's a good thing about technology, that it really helps us connect. It's how you do it, how you approach it.
Yes.
How you approach it is very important. So for instance, if you I'm doing my BKD back in October, in next month, but I used to do a lot of research afterwards on different historical work. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm actually creating a travel log while I'm there. So nice. You bring your community with you. That's the key. Or you create it, and wherever you go, they're there for you, and that's a great feeling.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it is nice to have a technology. I feel like since the pandemic, it's created this like sense of ease. Like, okay, maybe I physically can't be there, but I can participate online. And that's great for everyone.
And people really love that. They don't just want to go and see a film. They want to be able to engage and be seen and heard. And so our festivals, we encourage more interactivity. That's why we're doing the workshop and panels and Q&A. And we don't have panels this year, but we do have Q&A. A lot of the filmmakers will be showing up. They've already informed us. So that's the key thing, to get interactivity. And how did you get there? How did you, that kind of information, which you're not going to get from just sitting watching Netflix,
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And ask those questions that, many people probably have, like what inspired them to do it, a little bit more in depth on whatever they're trying to, deepen or dig into. So that's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the key thing. I mean, more and more our festivals, we're looking to make them more interactive, that rather than just panels and films. I mean, that's good, but we gotta get more, because that's really the direction everyone is going into, especially now with podcasts and social media. So, and that's the key, to have something that's at the same time not be entirely interactive, but actually have that human energy of actually having a live event, and that's important too. So you gotta have that, a little bit of both.
Yeah, totally. And so just to clarify to everyone, the festival is going to happen October 20th and through the 22nd.
Right. The 20th and 21st are going to be live in person at the Producers Club, and the 22nd will be online.
Sam, did you have any more questions for Dan?
No, I just I guess I was if people want to learn more about this, like did you want to plug like the actual website and everything so they know exactly where to go to get it? Obviously we're going to put links up for it and stuff too, but just to let the audio listeners know, where can they find out more information if they do want to check out either the in-person or the live a day?
The best way is just go directly to the program, directly to the website. The program is already up. Psychedelic, www.psychedelicfilmandmusicfestival.com. So it's very easy to navigate. It's not that complicated, and we got all the documentaries and shorts in there. And they're interested in buying tickets, they can just get them right then and there. And the online also is also available. Also, that's for Sunday.
And it's nice on the webpage too. It has previous interviews. It has previous bands, you know, and their video. So it's nice to have.
Yeah, you can scroll down, especially the homepage, and you'll see some of the work we did with the veterans and the fundraising and other bands as well. So, you know, hopefully we'll do more of that in the next year or so. You know, more another fundraising. Just getting the bands together. You know who musicians are. It's not easy. Just getting these 5 musicians together and to cooperate. So it's a challenge, but it's worth it though. And when you actually do it, it's good. It's a good feeling.
Yes. Well,
All right.
I appreciate you taking time to talk to us again, Dan. We always love having you on. So hopefully, you know, when the horror season rolls around and the sci-fi, you know, festival comes back, we can have you on again to chat that, and then next year catch up on this festival.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jordana, and thanks, Sam, for your generosity and allowing me to share, you know, my thoughts on this. And
of course, it was a lot of fun to chat with you about this stuff because I find this stuff so interesting, and it's nice.
Yeah, and perhaps one day we'll just all meet together live in person. In the meantime, we have technology to help us.
Yes, that would be fantastic, though, to have that happen.
That would be fun.
So.
Great. Well, you guys have a great night, and wherever it is, I think it's night where you know, and hopefully we'll speak to you soon.
Yes,
and we'll have Jonathan send you the link for the online. Really do let us know what you think afterwards.
I absolutely will. I'd love to. And again, guys, thank you for tuning in. And you can find us on all streaming platforms, all social media accounts, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Sam, anything else?
YouTube. If you're seeing this somewhere on the internet, you'll find it elsewhere as well. But thanks, Dan. Just one final time. Thank you for giving us your time. And we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
Bye.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Night.